Thank you to President von der Leyen. We'll now hear from the political group presidents, starting with Manfred Weber for the European People's Party.
Chancellor Merkel, President von der Leyen, President Sassoli, dear colleagues. His name is Francesco. He's a junior doctor in a hospital in Bergamo. He faced a question that no doctor should ever have to answer. He wants to save lives, but in this hospital there are no more beds available. He is forced to decide between life and death. At the same time, the neighbouring countries in Europe block the export of protective masks. Fear reigns. National self-interest triumphs. The neighbouring countries hang Francesco out to dry. And it's not just Francesco. Many people all over Europe asking themselves, what happened to solidarity? Where is Europe when we need it the most? Hohe Erwartungen liegen auf der deutschen Ratspräsidentschaft.
The expectations of the German Council presidency are very high indeed, Madam Chancellor. Europe trusts you, and where others sow division, you bring us together. And the same was true for Adenauer and Kohl in the past, and the same may be true now for you during this corona crisis. It's true, this Council presidency should not be a footnote in history books. This is about no less than the future of Europe and determining whether the coming years will be strong or not.
People can see are the euro crisis, migration crisis, Brexit crisis, and now the corona crisis. We are stumbling from one crisis to the other. And why? Because all too often we are led by fear. And fear is the enemy of solidarity. Fear is the enemy of the future, and fear is the enemy of our freedom. Look again to Francesco. He was not led by fear. He showed courage. Courage that we need in Europe now more than ever before. Courage to show solidarity. And the first important step is now the recovery fund. We need a solution this month. Courage in the future. We cannot spend the money we borrowed from our children on the past. We need to build the future. Climate, digital, industries, simply the most modern continent. Courage to be fair. When you borrow money, you need to tell honestly how to pay it back. Does anybody here in this room seriously believe that you can pay back the debts of the European Union without digging into own resources? I think no. And that's why we need a repayment plan before 2028 with, for example, a new digital tax. And courage to be free. Europe is not a cash machine. Europe is a union of shared values. Rule of law must be respected. And you referred to several other points in your today's introduction of the German presidency. We have to deliver on concrete solutions on migration, on Brexit, on trade, and a lot of other things. But colleagues, I'm afraid that this is simply not enough. 70 years after Robert Schuman was confronted with even greater challenges. Europe lay in ruins, millions dead, people displaced, hunger. Nevertheless, Schuman had the courage to look beyond the everyday events. He had faith in Europe. Today, we also have an immense job to do. Digital revolution, a hostile Russia, America in retreat, and assertive China, putting us to the test. The North Pole is melting, Australia is burning, and the liberal democracy in which we all believe so strongly in is heavily under attack. Yes, the everyday is testing us again. And again, the question is there, do we, like Schuman, have now the courage to look beyond the everyday? And what is my question when I raise this beyond the everyday? I think we have to talk about identity. Today, we justify Europe on the basis of small, everyday success stories. Roaming charges, no border controls, the euro, we build up motorways, we are stronger in a globalized world. But, dear colleagues, this perspective is a quite egoistic perspective. If Europe delivers to me, then Europe is good. If Europe is not delivering to me, then Europe is bad. This is not enough anymore. This view of Europe leaves again Francesco high and dry in the emergency room once again. No community can survive without community spirit, without shared beliefs, without its own identity. Simply, I would mention it in EPP terms, simply the European way of life. Like you described it, Madam Chancellor, democracy, the independence of our courts, prohibition of death penalty, the social market economy, and above all, freedom. In the United States, they still have death penalty and no national health insurance. And in China, no democracy, no freedom at all. Our European way of life is unique, and that makes us Europeans. It is good to be a European, and I am proud to say that I am a European. We need to rediscover our courage for the future, the courage to take the next step. Solidarity will only last, and our values will only win up on the global level if we can create a shared community spirit. And therefore, we need a truly European democracy that people can connect to. That is why we need to think big. Like Václav Havel did it, like Helmut Kohl did it, like Lech Walesa did it, to mention only a few of them. I trust, dear Chancellor, that the German presidency and you yourself will be up to the task, to deliver not just only on the daily challenges, but also looking beyond for the next step in the European integration, building a living European democracy, yes, to a truly European identity, yes, to the European way of life. Thank you.
Grazie, President.
Thank you, President. I'll now give the floor to President García Pérez on behalf of the Socialists and Democrats. Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, dear Chancellor Merkel, welcome to our House. This is the House of European democracy. There are moments in history which require vision and courage, and this is one of those moments. That's why we are counting on your experience and your German experience in forging cooperation beyond personal interests to bring Europe together. We are coming to a time which is going to set the course for Europe, and we have to ensure that we can act more rapidly and in a more united way facing these crises, protecting our strategic sectors and ensuring the resilience of our society. The next Council could adapt the recovery plan and the budget, and this could be decisive. And then we will have a lot of money. But this is not just a topic about figures. This is about a political project. When Robert Schuman suggested to Konrad Adenauer the coal and steel community, this was a historic moment. It wasn't a technical project. It was one of moral responsibility towards the people of Europe. The future of Germany today continues to depend on the future of Europe and vice versa. In the coming months, we'll be working side by side to overcome the differences between the North and South or the East and West in order to strengthen our union for the good of our citizens. We have to show the world that it's possible to create a fairer society, one that is more sustainable, which will think about the future generations and the environment, a society based on equality, with women as leaders in all institutions, one which will protect public authorities, public health, education, fairness for workers, which demands fair wages, one which is able to manage migratory flows in a fair manner. This is all on the agenda, and you can count on us to work with you. We can see that the way we've worked in the past is no longer going to work. My political group and my colleagues have worked on a roadmap for a fairer Europe, one which will be closer to citizens. And there are two main areas that we still need to look at. One is own resources in order to be able to overcome transnational issues, and the second is to work with our citizens through the Conference on the Future of Europe. Chancellor, I would just like to finish by saying that we all share European values. We all have to share the same commitment to defending these values and ensuring that they become reality. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you. President Cholos, on behalf of the Renew Europe Group, you have the floor.
Madame la Chancelière, pendant que j'écoute...
Madam Chancellor, listening to your words, I felt very moved. We are both from the same side of the wall. We've all known the other side of Europe, Eastern Europe, one that was marked by decades of communist dictatorships and other totalitarian regimes. There are many of us here in this room who have come from this often neglected part of the continent, but we all want the same thing: a strong, free, prosperous Europe. That's why we have to fight against disenchantment, discouragement, and the decline in belief in Europe. We have to demonstrate our ambition and look at a number of important files and areas where Europe has to work. Hope is the only way to overcome this disenchantment. You talked about the Conference on the Future of Europe. We need the recovery plan and the new MFF. The most recent forecasts from the Commission on the economy show once again that we have no other choice. We're talking here about the future of our Europeans. And if we're to allow these divisions to appear, that will be a historic mistake. You're here today together with the representing the presidency of the Council, and we want to see an agreement next week. However, I can't hide my concerns. You recently said that we need to have the money before we talk about rule of law. If I may, I would like to mark my disagreement with this. Europe can't be built based on accounting. As you've said, Europe has been built around a project, a vision, and solid values. Today, there are too many European leaders who haven't understood these projects and what they represent. For example, Viktor Orban is a member of your political family, but he's not the only one to do this. Madam Chancellor, it's now time to accept those who want to forge our future, who want to accept European funds respecting the rule of law. We clearly have the political opportunity now. We have to use this 1.85 trillion, this unprecedented package, for good. We have to ensure that all Europeans can live in a free, prosperous and fair world. You have the power to do that, Madam Chancellor. Please don't let us down.
Grazie.
Thank you. On behalf of the Identity and Democracy Group, Mr. Meuthen, you have the floor.
Frau Bundeskanzlerin, Frau
Madam Chancellor, Madam Commissioner, President of the Parliament, many in the European Union expect and look forward to intelligent and future-oriented solutions during the German Council presidency, and that's something that we desperately need now. But everything you've proposed are far from intelligent and future-oriented. It's ideological and defamatory in nature, and it's so far removed from all the ideals that you celebrate. Europe's ideals, based on freedom, individual freedoms and sensible positions, is being trampled on by you. The Christian Judaic roots of Europe are being eroded by a multicultural mix, and we all know what can happen when this gets out of hand, as we saw in Dijon. The true interests of people are being ignored. These people feel they are French, Italians, Poles, Germans and first, and Europeans second. This sensible approach requires that we base our actions on law and science. This policy that you pursue, the Green Deal and the Recovery Fund, completely lets go of this principle of sensible decision-making. And what's worst is the limitation of individual freedoms, the pooling of debt and spending on borrowing is the opposite of everything that we stand for. You can simply spend 500 billion like that. And then you can add another 250 billion just like that. It's not your money to spend. It's the money of taxpayers. They are going to foot the bill. This is driven by socialist ideology, and freedoms are being trampled on. And then you say that Germany is going to be prepared to show solidarity. Are you aware of the fact that the average wealth of Germans is lower than that of Spaniards or French citizens? Are you aware of the fact that people enjoy their pensions at a later age in Germany than in other countries? So what kind of understanding do you have of solidarity, Ms. Merkel? Together with Christine Lagarde, you've got this triumvirate of Europe. Instead of using this crisis to get things back into proportion and you simply get carried away. You are betraying the very European ideals with this course of action and are punishing future generations to come. Thank you.
On behalf of the Greens, President Ska-Keller. Go ahead, please.
And Ms. Merkel, I think I can tell you on behalf of the broad majority of this House, warm welcome to the European Parliament.
This is a place where you can perceive the difficulties of the European Union, where, however, the vast majority pull together, work hard to improve Europe for our citizens, although there will be differences of opinion. This is a place where we need to work even harder to reflect and better represent the diversity in the EU. During your Council presidency, you are taking over at a difficult time. The coronavirus crisis has thrown major challenges, historical challenges up for the EU. Citizens have seen their faith in our shared European project eroded. But this crisis is an opportunity once and for all to craft solidarity in Europe. We need that urgently. You and the German government need to seize this opportunity, reshape Europe. I would commend you on the Franco-German proposal. It shows courage and is based on solidarity rather than national egoism. We would have liked to see something like that sooner, perhaps. But we have not won the day yet. A lot of hard work will be required until that programme is in place. We will need strong partners. We, the Greens in the European Parliament, are willing to support an ambitious recovery plan. We will champion a fund that facilitates forward-looking investment, that allows a greening of the economy, that tackles the challenges of the current day, a fund that helps the member states hardest hit to prevent their sovereign debt rising even further, a fund that allows for climate protection, that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. That is what we will advocate here in Brussels and in national parliaments across the Green movement. Now, the repercussions of the coronavirus crisis show that we can be resolute in our action, that we can achieve a lot where we show courage and resolution. We need those same qualities in tackling the climate crisis. The climate is not going to wait for us to deal with other issues. We are the first generation to really experience the effects of climate change, the increasing temperatures, the health threats threats, the way our daily lives have been affected. We are the last generation that can in some way rein in climate change. We need to look at renewables and a cleaner world, ensure sustainable transport. We have to take action. We have to implement the solutions that are there, and the German presidency can make a key contribution here. The climate law will be very important, and the targets for 2030. They must be ambitious. This is important. We are a historical greenhouse gas polluter, and we need to recognise that historical responsibility. And so we want to see 65% cut across the EU by 2030. I would appeal to you, be courageous for Europe in the fight against climate change. The world is waiting for a signal from Europe. We can be successful, but we need action immediately. You need to take action. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitto. On behalf of the ECR Group. Thank you, President. And I'd like to thank Chancellor Merkel for being here with us today to set out the priorities of the German presidency. Germany is taking on the rotating presidency at one of the most difficult moments in the history of our continent, between the Second World War and today. Sadly, so far, the EU response has been slow and limited in terms of efficacy, and lacking any genuine solidarity between member states. Yesterday, the Commission revised growth estimates downwards in Europe, down 7 to 8% in the Eurozone, 10% for Spain, Italy and France. We don't have any more time. Now is the time we have to act. Finding an agreement next week is vital. We have to ensure that the money arrives with our citizens and businesses as quickly as possible. That is our duty. And that's why we don't want to see a compromise that will bring us down. We want to see an ambitious agreement. In this presidency, Germany has a huge amount of responsibility on its shoulders. We have to set selfishness to one side and to rediscover the original spirit of Europe. We have to move beyond the divisions of the past. We need to provide new impetus for the economy, to support our companies and the sectors that have been affected the worst. We have to ensure that we can ensure the recovery of the internal market. However, the single market has to be properly balanced. We want to see flexibility. Well, flexibility in state aid shouldn't increase disparities between member states. We have to ask for responsibility in the use of resources, but it's wrong to impose any binds that will impede upon states' sovereignty. Yes, we need to see environmental compromises, but without compromising the viability of our businesses. We have to ensure that any discussions on the future of Europe are free from hypocrisy. And we need to be clear here. We don't want to see centralised rulings from Brussels. We want to see Brussels which will be more respectful and aware of national prerogatives. And we can't allow states to be accused of supposed violation of human rights just because they don't agree with Brussels. We also need to see a proper migration policy. Your Minister of the Interior yesterday said that many member states have been left alone in handling migratory flows. It's not just a question of reforming the asylum system, but we need to clearly, strongly defend our external borders, and also to use navies to prevent human trafficking. This is a weapon that Erdogan is using against Europe. We can't allow him to continue to broaden his influence in the Mediterranean while the European Union remains silent. We also need to achieve a good agreement on Brexit and also transatlantic trade. Fighting terrorism and international trade are also topics where we can only be stronger if we find an agreement with our historic partners. We need Europe to confront China without fear. We need, of course, to speak out against those member states who are turning a blind eye to what's happening in Beijing, who are trying to protect trade interests and ignoring unfair competition. We have to ensure that we defend European assets against hostile activities. Yours is the country of Joseph Ratzinger, a genuine European patriot. Sorry, I don't think that's a very correct way to act. I didn't hear what you were saying. Please listen to everyone who speaks in this Parliament with respect. As I said, Chancellor, yours is the country of Joseph Ratzinger, a genuine European patriot. The Emeritus Pope has said that Europe can't be built if we ignore our own identity. I wish you all the very best for your presidency, and I hope you will learn from this, because Europe will not be the same as it was in the past. Thank you.
Shirdevan.
Mr. Shirdevan, President of the GUE Group.
Thank you, President. Madam Chancellor. This Council presidency represents a second opportunity for you. Europe has not forgotten that the German answer, your answer, to the financial and economic crisis was austerity at the time. And the south of Europe paid the bitterest price for this. Youth unemployment, privatization, the dismantling of public services, lower wages, lower pensions, and this very policy at the time almost left the EU in tatters and shreds. And I very much hope that your understanding of the errors of the past will allow you to correct those in future, and that we can move from austerity in the past to solidarity now. Madam Chancellor, your record will be measured on the basis of your ability to tackle this economic and social crisis in pandemic times. But no one has mentioned so far the people who are working in systemically critical people, care workers, medical staff, educators, people working in shops, petrol stations, bakeries. They're not being mentioned in this debate at all. Our political task surely must be to ensure that we work against precarious and insecure forms of work and poverty. Europeans are fed up with this squabbling between member states, and we need an agreement in time for this summer on the recovery fund and the EU budget. And when I hear from friends from your political parties and from the Commission President today in particular that the support should be linked to reform, cuts, privatization once again, then I wonder whether conservative sectors of the political spectrum haven't been watching the news at all. So one piece of advice. We've heard repeatedly the German finance minister blocking the digital tax and pointing to the OECD. But we've now heard that the Trump government has moved away from the negotiation, so it's time now to act. And in addition to this, we can have country-by-country reporting so that we can really tackle the problem of tax evasion and close those loopholes. Now, the ecologic and social renewal and transition is something we agree is a cornerstone for the future of Europe, and we believe that the Green Deal needs to be in line with the Paris objectives, and the current form of that Green Deal, as proposed by Ms. von der Leyen and yourself, is miles away from that. If you say that the environment is close to your heart, then why do you defend a Mercosur agreement? You know as well as I do that the Brazilian far-right President Bolsonaro is also responsible for the logging of the Amazon rainforest. And I also feel, by the way, that any agreement with far-right extremists should be excluded anyway. Or is it the case that when it's about business that the European values simply become insignificant? These values sink together with every person drowning in the Mediterranean Sea. And these are people who need support and help. And you're not helping them by doing dirty deals with autocrats or warlords. You help them by coming up with a system based on solidarity. Please pass this message on to Interior Minister Seehofer. Trust and confidence in European democracy can be strengthened, Madam Merkel, if we can rein in the influence of lobbies on council, and if we can make the minutes publicly available. Transparency, you said yourself, was a leitmotif for the council presidency, and that's of course something that many would have to emulate, but it would be a significant step forward, allowing member states to come together, work together, rather than working alongside one another, come together and unite around a common goal, an ecologically sustainable, democratic and just Europe. Thank you for your attention.
Grazie.
Thank you. On behalf of the non-attached members, Mr. Sonnenborn, 1 minute.
President. Chancellor Merkel. Can you lead the European Union out of the crisis? That is what many people are wondering. Europe seems to yearn for German leadership. Why now? If it had been the case some 80 years ago, we could have saved ourselves a lot of headaches. Europe doesn't seem to be succeeding on many fronts. Looked at Viktor Orban, it seems the EU is going to ban climate change, overcome migration by preventing it from happening. Even you and your 750 billion cannot prevent Hamburg from getting back into the Bundesliga. That seems to be the only